You know, the French Revolution gave us the rights of man. But did those rights really apply to everyone? That's the big question we're tackling today. One of the toughest and most profound issues of the entire revolution, the abolition of slavery.
In the last video, we studied the role of women in the French Revolution. In this video, we are going to study the abolition of slavery in French society. And wow, this is a story that really gets to the heart of things. It's all about these incredible, soaring ideals of liberty crashing right up against the brutal, cold reality of a global economy.
So, to really get why this was such a massive, difficult issue, we've got to look at the economic engine it was up against. I mean, the French colonial economy was making an insane amount of money, but it was all built on a foundation of, well, just profound injustice. All right, take a look here. The French colonies in the Caribbean. We're talking about places like Martinique, Guadeloupe, and San Domingo. These places were absolute economic powerhouses. They were feeding Europe all these new tastes it was suddenly craving, you know? Sugar for their tea, coffee for the new cafes popping up everywhere, tobacco, indigo dye, all of it. And the demand, it was just completely insatiable. But this created a huge problem, right? Because these plantations were far away, the work was brutal, the environment was totally unfamiliar, and honestly, Europeans were not exactly lining up for the job. They were super reluctant to go, which led to this massive labor shortage. So the big question was, who was going to do all this work? Well, the answer was a system that was as brutal as it was efficient, the triangular slave trade. It was this huge, horrifying network that connected Europe, Africa, and the Americas. And its one and only goal, to supply enslaved human beings to do the work on those plantations. Let's just walk through what this journey actually looked like. It started with French merchants sailing from ports like Bordeaux or Nantes, heading for the African coast. There, they would buy people, actual human beings, from local chieftains. These people were then branded and shackled, packed as tightly as possible into ships for a horrifying 3-month journey across the Atlantic. And if they survived that, they were sold to plantation owners in the Caribbean. And you've got to understand, this wasn't some small, hidden part of the economy. The entire economic prosperity of major French port cities, places like Bordeaux and Nantes, was built directly on this booming slave trade. And that's a super important point to remember. Slavery wasn't just some far-off colonial problem. It was woven right into the very fabric of the French economy back home. Okay, so this brings us right to the heart of the conflict, because on one hand, you have the French Revolution exploding with these world-changing ideas about freedom, liberty, and rights for all. But on the other hand, how on earth could those ideals possibly exist alongside the economic reality of slavery? You see, the central idea of the whole revolution was summed up in the Declaration of the Rights of Man, and that created an immediate, unavoidable contradiction. I mean, if liberty is a natural right for everyone, how can one person own another? It just doesn't work. So that slogan, the rights of man, it became a powerful weapon for abolitionists and a source of major anxiety for anyone making money off the slave trade. And that was the massive question that was being debated in the halls of power. If all men are born free and equal, does that mean all French subjects? Does that include the hundreds of thousands of enslaved people toiling away in the colonies? It was the question nobody could ignore. And this is where the politics get really interesting. You can see the contrast here. The first government of the revolution, the National Assembly, well, they talked a lot. They held these long, passionate debates. But at the end of the day, they were too scared of ticking off the powerful businessmen who were getting rich from the slave trade. So they did nothing. It wasn't until later, when things got way more radical under the Jacobins, that the new government, called the Convention, was finally ready to do something about it. And that action, man, it was a huge moment in the history of human rights. It was this brief but absolutely brilliant glimmer of freedom for the enslaved. The year to remember is 1794. The convention did something truly radical. In one of its most revolutionary social reforms, it passed a law to free all slaves in the French colonies. Just like that. For the very first time, the ideal of liberty was officially meant for everyone. Okay, now this print from 1794 is so fascinating. It really captures the weird, complex feelings of that exact moment. On one hand, it's celebrating emancipation. You can even see the title says, "The Freedom of the Unfree," but it also shows you a lot about the European mindset at the time. So let's break down the symbolism here, because this is where it gets really complex. You've got all the revolutionary symbols, right? The tricolor banner, the slogan, the rights of man, but look closely at what's actually happening. A white French woman, who's meant to be France, is handing out European clothes to the freed African and American Indian people. What does that tell you? It shows this really paternalistic attitude, this idea of a civilizing mission. It's like they're saying, okay, you're free, but to be truly free and civilized, you have to be more like us. It's a powerful reminder that even in this amazing moment of liberation, the idea of true equality was, well, it was still pretty flawed.
But, as huge as that 1794 decision was, the fight was nowhere near over. The road to permanent abolition was going to be a long one, with a lot of steps backward. And here's the shocking part. That incredible, hard-won freedom, it turned out to be temporary. Just 10 years later, Napoleon Bonaparte comes to power. And what does he do? He reintroduces slavery. Yep, the powerful plantation owners, whose whole idea of freedom was the freedom to make a profit by enslaving others, well, they won again.
So, as you can see from this timeline, the path to abolition was definitely not a straight line. It was more like 2 steps forward, 1 giant step back. You get freedom in 1794, then that tragic reversal in 1804. It actually took another 40-plus years of struggle before slavery was finally, and this time permanently, abolished in all French colonies in 1848.
This whole massive, decades-long struggle for the act of freeing can be summed up in one powerful word: emancipation. That was the goal, and it took revolution and reversals and just tireless fighting to finally make it happen.
This struggle for emancipation really lays bare some of the deepest contradictions of the French Revolution, but it was just one of the ways it completely transformed society. In the next video, we will study the revolution in everyday life.